It's March 4th, 2020, and you are listening to the Northern Parlay. I'm Calico Jack.
I'm BurritoJesus.
And we have a special guest this week. Special guest, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I am known as the Degenerate Gambler around here.
The Degenerate Gambler is joining us in studio this week to give his degenerate pick. So, without further ado, why don't we hop into what we learned from week 4? BurritoJesus, why don't we start with you, because I actually missed the game I want you to talk about because I was on vacation. I missed the Roughnecks Renegades Showdown. So maybe give us a little bit of a breakdown of what happened there.
Yeah, I think in the last podcast I said I was going to miss every game last weekend, but it turns out I came back into town early enough to catch that game, and I also did sneak away from my vacation out of the city to also watch XFL football when I was out there. But yeah, I think what I learned, that game was really interesting, and I felt like the Renegades really should have had a better fate, except for the fact that Landry Jones threw 3 interceptions in the first quarter and then tore his knee, potentially ending the season. But I kind of thought that I learned that the Renegades are a pretty good team. I think their ceiling is going to be hurt if Landry Jones is hurt for a long time, but the way they played PJ Walker I thought was pretty good in that game. And I thought they would be able to be like pretty close with them. The line moved towards the Roughnecks by the closing. It was like -3 for the Roughnecks by the time the game closed. But yeah, I was pretty impressed by the Renegades in that game. How about you, Degenerate Gambler? What were some of the things you learned from week 4?
So my biggest takeaway from the week 4 was that the defenders are frauds, hucksters, and absolute trash tier. I have had a lot of faith in them going into the year because I had heard of their quarterback before. So that caused me to put a $20 bet on them to win the championship. But yeah, I don't know, just their entire lack of offensive production and the fact that I think they have let up the most touchdowns of any team in the league really kind of shattered my faith in them. So I'm kind of just considering that a lost bet at this point.
Yeah, they just, to me, what's so strange is that they looked so good, especially those first 2 weeks, because they have receiving talent as well. So it's not an issue. Like, they had an AAF standout. Was it Rashad Ross?
Rashad Ross.
Yeah. So they had, and they've got Eli Rogers too. Like, they've got talent. There's no reason that they should. And Pep Hamilton looked he looked capable the first 2 weeks. Like, they seemed like they were calling a pretty decent offense, but some of those Cardale Jones passes we've seen the last couple of weeks.
It's crazy to me that they couldn't score any points against the Vipers. I'm shocked by that. I thought that the Vipers were a little bit undervalued heading into that game. Well, not heading into that game initially, because that line opened with the Vipers as favorites.
Yeah.
When it closed, and I did bet on the Vipers when it closed, you could have the Vipers at +5. So it was literally a 7-point swing from opening to closing. And I thought that the game was going to be close. I didn't think the Vipers were just going to go away with it like that.
It was utter domination. I don't know. It was stunning. The way that they just haven't shown up on the road the last 2 weeks. I'm so wary of betting on that team now because I'm not sure really what to expect game to game.
I think one of the things to really think about is the fact that if this is anything like the NFL, which I know that it's not, but in terms of sort of offensive philosophy, I know it takes, especially like at the beginning of the year, it takes a few weeks for the offenses to actually get up to gear. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the defenses sort of dominate earlier in the season, which is why start of the NFL season, bet as many unders as you can, just because it's so much easier to install a defense than install an offense. It takes so much longer for the offense to get up to speed, and I think that's kind of what we're starting to see in the XFL here, is that a lot of the offenses are starting to grasp their systems a little bit more. They're starting to actually run a little more smoothly, a little more efficiently. There's a lot fewer of just kind of the dumb errors, people in the wrong spot, since they've been at it live for a month now.
It's true, but you wonder about a team like the Defenders who actually looked competent their first 2 weeks on offense, but I guess that it might also be a symptom of being on the road the last 2 weeks. It makes them look
I think that
bad,
makes a huge difference.
Is it that profound? Do you think so?
I think it does. And I think especially in the Defenders case where they went DC to LA to Tampa. So you literally, and they go home in between. So they went DC to LA, LA to DC, DC to Tampa. And I think because those areas are so spread out, and I don't know, I'm still curious to find out what level of flight that the XFL flies.
Spirit Airlines.
Yeah.
Spirit. That's so many miles to be putting on a bench seat.
Exactly.
What's the line on Spirit Airlines? It's the only airline where instead of Sprite, they ask if Sierra Mist is okay.
The Sierra Mist that much worse than Sprite out. But I think the road thing does make a huge difference. And I think historically, if you look at the NFL or any other league, when before like there was charter flights, first class hotels, and all these things that these leagues now can afford to put their players in, and now that we're kind of in like a mid tier league where there is more money behind the XFL than there was behind the AAF, obviously, but.
Oh yeah, that's clear.
Yeah. But I doubt that they're putting them in the same like hotels and flights and things like that. And I think the road miles does make a big difference. And why it's kind of, if you're seeing these kind of scheduling quirks where a team has to go coast to coast over 2 weeks, I think can make a big difference. And maybe they'll show up a little bit better at home this week.
Could be. Was there anything else you picked up from week 4, Degenerate Gambler?
I'll call it a renewed faith in the Battlehawks. At first, I thought they were just going to be a run team that just, hammers the ball and just wins dirty and wins a lot of low-scoring games. But Tiamu, whatever his name is.
Tamu?
Jordan Tamu?
Yeah, we're going with Tamu. Yeah.
All right, we're a Tamu podcast. I've actually been really impressed with him. Not only has he been making a lot of like competent throws, but he just has that extra sort of facet of being a running quarterback when things break down and he needs to break off 7 or 8 yards. Seems like he was doing that every 2-3 plays whenever they needed a good 6-yard gain to make the first down. He was pretty reliable on that. So
he's been good. Like he was obviously you could tell because as you started talking about it, how it's traumatized BurritoJesus because he spilled his drink all over himself. But the fact that the Battlehawks have been so run heavy almost to their detriment, and they finally, whenever they take the reins off Tamu even a little bit, he looks so good doing it.
The best part was that this was the first week I'd bet against the Battlehawks, so I kind of needed them to continue to be true to form. And then, of course, in the first 2 series where I think they went touchdown, it was like they were running read option on first down and like play action on first down, which is what I was kind of calling for. And I was like, these goddamn... Of course, they're going to try to sue me. Well, the Dragons did end up covering, but I was pretty upset while watching that game. I only actually got to watch the first half, and then I kind of was following the second half on Twitter and through updates. But
that's the game I watched the whole thing of. So here's what I learned. The one thing I would take away is that the Seattle Dragons looked so much different with BJ Danielson than they did with Brandon Silvers. So to give a little bit of a breakdown here, because I want to give a statistical picture. In the 23-16 loss to the Battlehawks, BJ Daniels was 5 of 10 for 100 yards, a touchdown and an interception. He also ran 7 times for 84 yards. Brandon Silvers was 4 of 10 for 40 yards, which is 2.7 yards per attempt, and almost got nothing done. No rushing yards either. Really got nothing done on offense, even remotely. Which this is a shame. I was formerly a Brandon Silvers stan, some would say.
I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah, but I think BJ Daniels just made the Dragons look so competent. BurritoJesus shared an article with me about 2 hours ago about how Jim Zorn is still not announcing his quarterback for week 5, which seems like lunacy to me.
They're entrenched in the starter because he won the job through camp, I guess. But it's like the results have been so bad through 4 weeks. Like, how can you not give BJ Daniels more of a run?
It's, by the way, the other thing that jumps out to me here is, like you were talking about, Degenerate Gambler, Tamu had 16 rush attempts for 63 yards, which, like, in and of itself is not a great. It's 3.9 yards per carry, but it shows like he's a pretty major part of the offense. But his passing stats, 20 of 27 for 264 yards.
Yeah, pretty good.
Which showing he's accurate, he's moving the ball. So I don't know. We kind of learned this week that, and I guess we'll get into it in a little bit of our themes, but this was a week of QB shakeups and maybe some QBs solidifying their spots and some absolutely not doing that.
Yeah. Why don't we move on to our Guess the Line segment?
Ooh, okay, let's do it.
So last week, Calico Jack won 3-1, and he's up 6-5-1 over the last. We only did for the last 3 weeks because we didn't do week 1.
So let's hop into it for this week. So the first game, we're just going to go through. We'll each name our guess as to what we had. So the first game was Dragons at Roughnecks. Burrito Jesus, what did you guess for this one and why?
I had Roughnecks minus 14. I figured that with the Roughnecks playing a little bit better than the Battlehawks through the last couple of weeks, you just kind of bump up that last number. And the Dragons were open at 12 last week, 12-point underdogs against the Battlehawks. And the Roughnecks are considered better than the Battlehawks, so I just add a couple points there.
So I came in at 11.5 for the Roughnecks because I thought this line was me assuming that BJ Daniels would start. And also because the Roughnecks were kind of quietly underwhelming in that Dallas game. So I thought they would maybe adjust a little bit for that and realize that the 13.5 on the Battlehawks line last week was a little bit foolish. So I came in at 11.5. What about you, Degenerate Gambler?
I had the Roughnecks at minus 14.5. I will put in the caveat that I keep forgetting about how abjectly silly the extra point rules are in this league. And just, so really, I keep thinking, okay, it's going to be at least 2 touchdowns. But a touchdown is never worth 7. And it's never worth 9. It's rarely worth 8. But I still feel fairly comfortable in saying that the Roughnecks will win by 3 touchdowns, just because I know it's been a few years since he's been a head coach, but every shot that they have of Jim Zorn on the sideline, he looks so precious, but so lost. He's just wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, but has no idea what's going on.
Was it week 1 where he didn't realize that the microphones were recording him, like he was covering his mouth?
Yes, yeah. He's not the only one, but...
No, poor sweet boy. So this one actually opened at Roughnecks minus 13.
Yeah. So
that one goes to Burrito Jesus.
I did it.
You did it. With a minus 14. So, you didn't hit exactly, so calm down a little bit. But that's what went on this one. So the next one, we have the New York Guardians, the least remarkable team in the league, at the Dallas Renegades. Burrito Jesus, what did you have for Guardians at Renegades?
I had Renegades by 7.
Okay. Any reason for that?
I always
Because it's Philip Nelson. It's not Landry Jones.
I thought it would be more with Landry Jones. I did downgrade them that, but I think with Landry Jones, it probably would have been like Renegades by 9 or something like that. But I did try to look at what the lines had been kind of previously with these two teams. It's not a great system, but
no, so I had Renegades minus 6, kind of for the same reason that you did. The only thing I thought is they might artificially inflate because the Guardians did win.
Yeah,
and the fact that the Renegades suffered a QB injury, I thought it might drive it down. What about you, Degenerate Gambler?
I had it at Renegades minus 2.5 just because with we'll say a fly-by-night football league with, I'm going to assume, very little, widely available stats for all the players. Any kind of lost starting QB, I think, is just going to depress the line in order just to get bets on the other side.
And so that was a surprising part because it did open at Renegades minus 7.
Oh, wow.
So Burrito Jesus hit this one dead on.
Exactsies.
Which is, he's confident now, but we'll get to the next two.
Yeah, this is the high point.
So next game was Battlehawks at Defenders. So we've got the Defenders who are 2-0 at home versus the Battlehawks who I would say have been getting a lot of, they've been garnering a lot of attention. They've been doing pretty well, but they haven't covered. They didn't cover last week.
No, they haven't covered as a favorite, but they have covered as underdogs.
Yeah, so they're kind of mixed as favorites. So, Battlehawks at Defenders. Burrito Jesus, what did you have?
Battlehawks minus 6.
And why did you do that?
I'm surprised at how much, I thought that there would be more hate, I guess, on the Defenders on how they've been kind of trending in the last few weeks. And the way the Battlehawks have basically been trending up and the Defenders have been trending down. And so I think I maybe a little bit overdid it that way.
Okay, I had Battlehawks minus 3.5, just for the reason that I kind of put it in the Vegas zone of where you're kind of trying to track money on both sides. You put in that Vegas zone of 3.5, 4.5. So I had the Battlehawks as minus 3.5.
Yeah, and again, I just sort of blew it out of the water with Battlehawks minus 10.5. I know that that's a bad line to guess, but that's coming from both my newfound hatred for DC as well as my burgeoning love for Jacob Tamu, or whatever his name is.
Jordan
Tamu, I'm sorry. I've always been bad with names. But yeah, I don't know. I do think that the stalling of the DC offense is a huge concern because I feel like, as I was saying, this is the part of the year where your offense needs to be getting better. And I think just on the XFL site, they have sort of the plus-minus differential for touchdowns for and touchdowns against.
Oh.
And DC is letting up so many touchdowns. It's pretty ridiculous. So I don't know that Vegas would put it at 10.5, but like for me, anything less than 10.5 or more than 10.5, and I'm just hammering it. So
like Cardale Jones this week was 9 of 22 for 72 yards.
Yeah, the Vipers outgained the defenders 477 to 100 and something, which just completely blew me away. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. That's insane.
So it's just an absolutely atrocious. So we actually opened at Battlehawks -3.
way off.
Which goes to me on that one.
Yeah, which is a higher number than I think a lot of other places opened at. Like Bet 365, you could have gotten the Battlehawks at 2.5.
Okay.
When it opened, and now it's closer to 3.5, and it probably is going to keep trending the other way because I don't know if people believe in the defenders. But
so let's start with Degenerate Gambler for the final matchup of the week: the Vipers at the Wildcats. Explain your bet to us.
So I had opening line of Wildcats -3.5, and again, I'm just playing on, I guess let's say Vegas memory, or the desire for Vegas to play on people's memories, because I don't think the Vipers scored an offensive touchdown until week 3. So that's just, I feel like that's just an automatic public fade on him. But I do believe that the Vipers are a better team, but just in terms of what I think the line will be, I think a Wildcats -3.5 will kind of attract that 50-50 split on the bets that Vegas is always looking for.
So you and I both agreed, because I put this in the same zone as the Battlehawks. I did Wildcats -3.5. Same sort of Vegas zone. Just because I don't think the Vipers results have quite translated yet into what the betting lines are. So this kind of reflects that, because the Wildcats look terrible against the Guardians.
yeah, I went higher because the line was so high last week, and I guess like that was like the outlier line versus like the previous like couple weeks in the way that the market had valued the Wildcats. But yeah, I mean this was the one that kind of shocked me the most.
So they actually opened at Vipers -1.
Yeah,
Oh,
at Bet 365 you could have had the Wildcats at -1, and it's since moved. I think now it's like Wildcats -2. Yeah, I'm surprised that they would make the Vipers a road favorite after what the line was in the Wildcats game last week.
Yeah,
Because wasn't it Wildcats -7 at New York?
it was. Yeah.
It's just, there are some weird ones. I guess there's like some teams that the market is way more flexible on the line, in the sense that they're week to week. It's going to be hard to predict where it's going to go, because they're still trying to get a read on it. And it was funny because after one good week, the Wildcats were like completely overvalued, and now they're kind of back to where they were like the first 2 weeks.
Which, yeah, like, I don't know. This one's tough. So, yeah, so we ended up, BurritoJesus got 2, I got 2, and Degenerate Gambler got 1.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
So that's how we ended up this week. So now we're going to go to our favorite segment.
Jennifer, you got drunk and flipped a table at my white party.
Angela, you talked over my husband playing the flute.
Carissa, you burped at my son's christening.
You are all on blast. You're on blast. You're on blast. We're putting you on blast.
This is our new segment called Who's on Blast This Week?
Yeah, that you don't ever have to worry about a copyright strike.
No, never ever. So, Who's on Blast this week? I'm going to start. Number 1 on my Who's on Blast this week is the city of Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh.
There is so much urban sprawl that I went to a spring training game on Wednesday. This is not XFL related. And my Uber costs per day were like $150. How do people live this way? How do people go to baseball games, say have 1 to 5 beers at baseball games, and then return to their hotel in Central Phoenix where they are staying?
I think drunk driving.
It must be, because there's no other way to exist in the Phoenix and metro area.
So I went to Phoenix for a bachelor party, and our way around that was there was a gentleman who would drive around in a golf cart with a very, very shoddy trailer that he would drag, and we would give him $20, and he would take 8 of us in his golf cart and ramshackle trailer to the strip club, wait for us outside, and then drive us back at the end of the night.
See, where was that
per
guy?
person?
No, it was $20 there, $20 back.
That's a great deal.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it really was. I mean, boy, did I fear for my life, because he was just flooring it. He took corners so sharp, and I think the trailer was attached by like a bicycle lock, but
That's fine.
Safe.
yeah. It turns out that the road safety laws in Arizona are non-existent.
Because as we know, Arizona is dry Florida. And
Sorry.
and super not in the way of like dry, like prohibition dry.
Oh, no,
Let me just
absolutely
make
not.
that clear. So, the city of Phoenix, you're on blast this week. My other on blast this week is Cardale Jones. Cardale Jones, you're on blast this week because you've been absolutely terrible since you saw the movie Sonic the Hedgehog. BurritoJesus, can you explain this for everybody?
There was a theory going around. I think it was first brought to light on Reddit. So the defenders were 2-0, and then Cardale Jones tweeted, "Going to see Sonic the Hedgehog." I don't think he tweeted a review of his movie. I didn't investigate this far. Since then, the defenders are 0-2, and Cardale Jones has been terrible. So I think it's safe to assume that Sonic the Hedgehog ruined Cardale Jones.
I mean, to be fair, Sonic the Hedgehog is I believe it is the highest grossing video game movie of the last like decade or 2 decades, or
That doesn't surprise me because video game movies are so bad.
boy, are they bad. I do remember.
But like, name other ones like Lara Croft Tomb Raider. I saw that in theaters.
I can tell you that when I was, I believe, 5 or 6, I went to go see the first Mortal Kombat movie.
Oh,
and-
yeah, that's a great movie, though.
Yes, and I got so scared during the fight between Johnny Cage and Goro that I began to cry, and my father had to take me home.
That's okay.
That's a classic movie that I don't think I was allowed to see. But
I wasn't allowed to see it either because it was like Power Rangers where there was too much fighting. Yeah.
I think they were okay with Power. My parents were okay with Power
Really?
Rangers, but not Mortal Kombat for some reason.
Oh man,
But there was a big Mortal Kombat scare. Like it was just like it was too violent for people.
one of the most popular baby names now is like Raiden.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of like an extension of Caden,
Yeah.
Jaden. But Raiden is a Mortal Kombat character.
Where like because someone told me that and then I wouldn't shut the hell up about Raiden, the Mortal Kombat character. But that's not what you do in polite company.
No. So I noticed in the notes you put a Pro Football Talk about ratings declining for 3 or 4 XFL games. Mm-hmm. I think I'm just going to put everyone on Twitter that talks about XFL ratings on blast.
This is why I wanted to talk about it.
I don't give a shit at all. Can we just stop talking about it? Like everyone's just like, oh, Pro Football Talk is such a hater, just complaining about the ratings declining every week. And everyone's like, well, actually the ratings are better than the NBA games and stuff like that. It's like it's the worst part of like my sport like
Ever.
fandom where it's just like, oh, please, the XFL is actually doing good compared to these things. Or it's like, oh, compared to this. It's just like, who gives a shit? Just shut up. Like, why are we talking about ratings every week? Like, I understand it's like to the success of the league, but week to week, like numbers coming up, like that just doesn't mean anything over like the larger season, like the playoffs, like big matchups. It's like literally the best game of the XFL season, or the most hyped game, the Renegades and Roughnecks, was on FS1.
Yeah.
And people are like comparing the ratings to like, I don't know, like NBA games on ABC. I just don't think that like it's apples and oranges, and like I just don't really give a shit. Like
It's one of the most boring and dumb discussions I would have because I was actually going to put Pro Football Talk on blast for this one because of the fact that it's not a each week is an update on the speculation of whether or not the XFL is viable just by ratings numbers.
Yeah,
that's just also like the way that TV ratings are now. Like in the early 2000s, an episode of Friends got like 25 million viewers, right? Like so these aren't like the way that we evaluate TV ratings now is nowhere near comparable to what traditionally people used to evaluate them on.
it just doesn't matter, I think, as much as people. And this Pro Football Talk guy is like great at winding people up, and like he's like very maligned in the NFL and XFL communities,
Which is good. You shouldn't be a friend of them either.
But it's just like-
but you're right.
but who cares? Like
Yeah.
you're spending all this airspace talking about ratings. Like that is so boring. Like I hate turning on Twitter on like Mondays and Tuesdays because that's literally everyone in the XFL is just tweeting about ratings and talking about on ratings. It's just like, who gives a shit? Just like stop talking about it.
Could not be more boring.
I don't think, TV ratings have anything to do with whether something gets extended or not. Because, like, I mean, NBC had 4 seasons of Unforgettable, which was the redheaded detective with an eidetic memory who solved crimes using her photographic memory. That got 4 seasons. So if you're telling me that is more entertaining than the Wildcats and the Battlehawks,
Yeah.
then
So did that mean she had to be in the scene of every crime?
yes, absolutely. I remember in the pilot episode, there was a murder outside of her apartment, and she knew where to find the murder weapon because in her photographic memory, she saw a shadow in the alleyway next to where the murder occurred, so she knew that there was a person there. Also, the Degenerate Gambler in me is furious at that show because in the first episode, like the first scene, she goes to a mob-run blackjack table, and before the blackjack dealer deals the cards out, he's shuffling them, he flips all the cards over face up, then all the cards over face back very quickly, but since she saw it, it was locked in her memory, so she knew exactly what cards were coming next. So she rinsed the mob casino, did not get shot in the back of the head on the way out, and just walked out into New York City with like $30,000 cash in her back pocket.
I don't know if you've ever played blackjack before, but that's pretty standard blackjack practice where they show you the order of cards briefly. So only people with photographic memory could benefit. But
The condition is actually called, so Poppy Montgomery was Detective Carrie Wells, an enigmatic former Syracuse police detective. Carrie Wells has hyperthymesia, a rare medical condition that gives her the ability to visually remember everything she has seen or heard.
I do know that you can definitely visually remember things that you have heard.
She's wanted to be a cop ever since her sister was murdered when she was 8 years old. I don't know, I think I'm into this show.
I can't wait for it to be on Netflix. I'm going to binge the...
So that finishes up our Who's on Blast. Although maybe next week I will blast Degenerate Gambler because I'll be loving Unforgettable.
for trashing Unforgettable.
So that we'll update on that one.
They lost me on the blackjack scene because I mean, although as they say, the house always wins unless you have hyperthymesia.
That's true.
I believe that is actually like on the city of Las Vegas crest on the big sign when you're driving.
It is.
Nobody with hyperthymesia allowed on the strip. Yeah. Well, let's move on to a segment that I've called New Faces at Quarterback. It's kind of funny because as much as I'd love that this was like the changeover week, there's a lot of these guys that may not even start next week, which is the fun part about the XFL is that everyone's like talking about some fresh new quarterback that's going to come in and then they get split reps in practice and then it's the other guy starting again.
And we never hear from them.
I decided to kind of try to look at some of the guys who did play a lot last week, who I hope will start next week, starting with BJ Daniels, who's now the new net yards per attempt leader in the XFL with only 14 passing plays. But he played pretty well. Like the offense moved. I don't think Seattle covers the spread last week without BJ Daniels coming in.
They had 2 straight touchdown drives.
So they need him, I think, to score points. Silvers has been awful every week. And I think that you just kind of got to hand the keys over to BJ Daniels now. I don't think you can continue having Silvers in there. I don't know how good BJ Daniels is, but I just can't see any more Silvers.
But he's a run threat too, right? So the Dragons' running game is actually not that bad.
That's true.
So he kind of adds a little bit of a multifaceted threat there, as well as the fact that, I don't know, he just completed passes.
Yeah,
that
and
was
like downfield,
nice.
completed passes downfield. So I think like heading into this week, they need them to have a chance against the Roughnecks. And Jim Zorn wouldn't commit to a starter as we're recording this on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue is that you can never discount the incompetence of Jim Zorn. Or just like, he's very clearly just stealing a paycheck. I'm sure they're giving him $82 a game or whatever it is. But he just, I don't know, he looks so lost. And I can never assume that he will ever make a proper decision. So
I mean, it's a bad sign when they picked Jim Zorn because he's connected to the Seattle Seahawks.
University of Washington.
As well, too, right?
Yeah.
He was a quarterback with the Seahawks, though.
Yeah, he was.
So it's like, it was, and they built this team, and like a lot of the guys that Jim Zorn picked to coach and the players had like those kind of area connections, which is not really how you build anything. Like if you want a successful enterprise, it's like, okay, I'm only going to hire people locally.
I was wrong, by the way. He wasn't University of Washington, but
he was the
Seattle
Seahawks. Yeah, he was the Seahawks quarterback. So I have a lot of hope for BJ Daniels. I'd like to see more of him. I swear to God, I hope they do not start Silvers this week, but
it actually decreases the fun of the game too.
Yeah.
Because Silvers is just not moving the ball. Like it makes it too tough. So the next one you've got on here for new faces at QB is Luis Perez, an old friend, a new face, but an old friend from the Birmingham Iron of the Alliance of American Football. Talk to us a little bit about Luis Perez.
I would qualify myself as a Luis Perez hater.
Given spanning multiple leagues.
I was surprised that he was the guy that got plucked out of the AAF to get opportunities in the NFL last year because he was so bad. The Iron won, but it wasn't because of Perez. It was because all. The rest of the team was so much better. But this last week, he looked pretty good, though I think the Wildcats' pass defense is not that great. So he kind of looked better than I think he is. But they're playing another team this week who I think can be beat through the air in the Renegades. So I'm kind of optimistic that if he gets a start, they'll be able to move the ball. Unfortunately, this week, the report is that McGloin's healthy and they're splitting reps at practice.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the secret to good quarterback play is you just don't really commit to anything.
No.
You want to have their confidence as shaken as possible because you want a very timid quarterback back there who will then, in the middle of the game, question the game plan.
Yes, yeah.
And I swear the head coach was just going to come over to the interview and punch him in the stomach while he was saying that.
That's one of the XFL highlights so far.
Yeah. Oh, and it will be the XFL highlight.
Oh, for sure.
Just dragging his team through the parking lot during the game.
I don't want to talk about Luis Perez anymore. He's terrible. Let's talk about...
I'm hopeful. I think he can do...
Oh, really?
The Guardians, I feel like they have value over the long term if they can find something better at quarterback because their defense is decent. They're decent. Mm-hmm. Their defense has played well. And I mean, you saw it this last week where they beat the Wildcats. So I think over the long term, if Perez is starting, then that team has something that they can cover the number over the next few weeks. If McGloin's starting, I don't feel it at all. It's just going to be so bad. I can't watch it.
The ratings will crater and Pro Football Talk will have fodder for months.
Let's go to the next one. It's Philip Nelson. I'm going to bring up some stats for you while you talk about Philip Nelson.
Not necessarily a new face because he did start week 1, but came in this week and is going to be kind of the long-term starter, it seems like, with Landry Jones going down with an injury, though I did see that Jones is expected to recover in 2 weeks, which I feel like is kind of insane, given that he hurt the same knee that he was wearing a knee brace on.
I would never sacrifice my long-term walking viability for an XFL starting job.
That's the thing, right? I guess because you feel like you hadn't really gotten a good run in pro football, and it's this is still so much tied to your kind of personal worth. I don't know. It's so weird. I'd be in the same position. I wouldn't be okay, well, these Renegades have a shot to win the XFL championship. I'm going to come back on a torn knee again, the second time this season.
Yeah, I mean, he's Landry Jones. That's Oklahoma, right?
Yes.
Yep.
He can just go to any used car lot in Oklahoma and be their number one salesman and make a damn fine living for himself. And nobody's ever going to twist his knee in the car lot.
Well,
it is Oklahoma, but that's a good point.
I was so disappointed this last week because I did say on the last episode that I didn't think he was going to keep throwing interceptions, and that proved itself incorrect in the first quarter. It was so hard to watch. But compared to Jones, Nelson just doesn't have the arm strength, I think, to make the same sort of throws that Landry was making, even though Landry was throwing it to the other team a lot. I think the Renegades kind of lose a lot of their upside with Nelson at quarterback, though I still think it's a good team. But maybe given the fact that Jones hasn't been able to not throw it to the other team, maybe they raise the floor of the team a little bit and kind of help out their offense.
So, because life is a fever dream now and everything happens and we forget it almost immediately, I have something fun to throw at you. Did you know that Philip Nelson was in the Alliance of American Football?
Yes.
For the San Diego Fleet?
Yes.
So I was looking up his stats this week because I didn't remember this.
Oh no,
we talked about this in the first week of the XFL, didn't we?
No, we didn't.
Yeah, we did.
If you're listening to this, go back to the first week. I don't believe this. Anyways, so
he was more views on that first episode.
Yeah, he was absolutely terrible for the Fleet.
He was okay.
In his first start against the Atlanta Legends, he completed 14 of 30 passes for 142 and an interception. The following week, he threw an interception on the first play, but had 2 touchdown passes. Yeah, so he was okay. He was 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a rating of 75.3.
So he was okay.
I don't know. I'm looking at that kind of mediocrity, and I'm going to say unequivocally that he did not earn the check that bounced on him when he tried to cash it at a liquor store the day after the game.
We went to cash converters.
Speaking of Philip Nelson and drinking, so he was charged with first and third degree assault
Those are the best assaults.
for kicking former Minnesota State football player Isaac Kolstad in the head during early morning hours after a day of underage drinking.
He kicked them in the head?
The argument involved a conversation surrounding a bar bouncer hitting on Nelson's girlfriend. Oh my God.
Wow.
So, not a great guy.
You're saying you strongly support.
Yeah, like, not a great... So, the guy who had kicked is able to walk but suffered permanent brain damage.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
really?
so this is not... he suffered brain bleeding, a skull fracture, brain shifting, and lung deterioration due to lack of oxygen. So I do not think that this is a podcast as an official fan of Philip Nelson.
Wow. Boy.
It really brought the mood down there, but I'm just a reporter. I just report the facts.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So we're not a... But
I can't believe you did remember he was in the AAF.
No, I did. I don't... Like
We didn't talk about this. We didn't talk about that during our AAF
We did
podcast.
not talk about that. I also just don't... So this actually segues quite nicely into my... I don't think he's very good. He runs the Bob Stoops offense fine,
Yeah.
but he's not accurate downfield. He just does those short passes to running backs. He doesn't strike me as a good quarterback at all, honestly.
No, I still feel like that team is going to be good because the rest of the pieces are good and the offense and the coaching is better than a lot of the other teams with bad quarterbacks in this league. But yeah, I don't think Nelson's very good. It's funny that I think in the AAF, I thought Nelson was a better quarterback than Luis Perez. And this kind of like this last week of Luis Perez playing decently in the XFL kind of makes me kind of like flip-flop on that argument. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's going to be very good over the long term. They kind of need Landry Jones, I think, to be kind of a true contender.
So we're not a Philip Nelson fan on this podcast.
Well, certainly not after that.
No. Okay,
Disavowed.
let's talk about Taylor Cornelius, because this is one that confuses me the most, I think. So the first 2 weeks of Taylor Cornelius with the Vipers, he looked terrible.
Yeah, he just
Fair?
Yeah.
Terrible?
not great. I would say
Not great. But
Certainly
then
better than Brandon Silvers.
he looked okay. He looked okay last week.
He looked okay, and maybe this is a giant indictment of the DC defenders as a whole.
Now we're getting there.
I mean,
Frauds.
they did let him run in from like 20 yards out.
They sure did.
The throws he made were mostly okay. He had like one terrible interception, but I think I still just want to see more Aaron Murray. Like, it's funny that like I was kind of surprised he didn't play last week. He was healthy, like, and dressed for that game, but I guess not healthy enough to play. I'm not too sure what they're going to do this week. I'm not even going to try to predict, but I think Aaron Murray is like a better long-term solution for the Vipers, but maybe they're already all in on Taylor Cornelius.
By the way, shout out to the Vipers, though, because they are supporting their quarterback, because they have two of the top three rushers in the XFL right now. Devion Smith has 296 yards, while Jacques Patrick, first 100-yard rusher in the XFL,
Oh, really?
is 231.
Yeah, the announcers were touting the over on the Devion Smith rushing yards. His over-under was 31, and he had 35 in the first quarter or something like that.
Yep, sure did.
And somebody was tweeting out the opportunities versus touchdowns scored as like a fantasy football stat, and Devion Smith has like the most opportunities in leagues to score touchdowns, and he has 0 touchdowns so far.
Which perfect. Also, fifth, just in case anyone's wondering, fifth in rushing in the XFL is Jordan Tamu at 186 yards.
Yeah. And take the ball out of his hands, though. I think they need to run the ball more to their running backs. But yeah, I think so. If you guys, getting to your perspective, how would you kind of rank these 4 quarterbacks kind of as the new potential starters in the XFL?
BJ Daniels is awesome. I'm all in on BJ Daniels. He's my number one. I would then go, I think Cornelius too, because he looked okay to me and he looks like he's growing within the role. So Jamie Elizondo, former Ottawa Red Blacks offensive coordinator, has taken over the play calling for Tampa Bay and actually called a good game last week against it.
I mean, they scored touchdowns the last 2 weeks, and he's been the one calling play calls.
Yeah, so let's give him a shout out there. So I'm going to put Cornelius second because I'm seeing growth at least, and then I think we can just kind of agree. Maybe Perez and then Nelson. I'm not big believers in those two. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, just based on my own moral fiber I have to put Nelson. Like, I'm a very anti-skull kick guy. But yeah, I mean, I think again my big issue with Daniels is where he ranks in my power rankings is going to depend on his split carries in practice.
Yeah, that's not a great sign.
I mean, inevitably he's going to be getting benched.
It's true.
Yeah, and again, Perez with still, I'm sure, active litigation against the San Diego Fleet for a lost paycheck. He's probably got that on
Still
his mind.
Nelson. Perez is the Iron, the Birmingham Iron.
My fault.
Yeah.
My fault, the Birmingham
How
Iron.
dare you, sir, mix up those two.
God, so many 1-yard dives for Trent Richardson. Yeah, so I guess I'd just go Cornelius, Daniels, again, pending split carries, and if he actually starts, which I doubt, because Jim Zorn will make the wrong decision.
He will.
And then Perez and then Nelson.
All right.
We're going to go to our team power rankings. So first, the 2 weeks ago, it was BurritoJesus driving the bus. Last week, it was me giving my power rankings. This week, the Degenerate Gambler is going to give his power rankings on our teams and how they've lined up so far in the XFL. So Degenerate Gambler, take it away.
Okay, so going by the traditional Northern Parlay tier system, I have Tier 1, which we've labeled as the contenders. I, again, firmly believe in the Battlehawks. I like what I see out of Tamu. He's making plays, whether it's, sort of the middle to intermediate routes. I didn't see him throw a lot of deep balls, but I don't think that necessarily needs to be part of their game plan, just because they're getting those sort of short and intermediate routes, and when it's not there, he's able to run for 5-6 yards a clip. So, again, yeah, impressed with them. I know their defense is, I believe, allowing the fewest TDs, so they're just that split between points for and points against is kind of in the favor of the Battlehawks. So I feel fairly comfortable putting them in sort of the driver's seat in terms of my number 1 in the power ranking. I mean, the Roughnecks in number 2. It would not surprise me if they finish the year as the number 1 team. They're currently undefeated, and just the rest of their schedule is just soft as all hell. So I think they got 2 games against the Dragons and 2 against the Vipers or something like that.
Yeah, I think they're favored. They're going to be favored in every game here on out.
So we can't argue with wins at that point.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I mean, they get a lot of touchdowns. PJ Walker, and I think him and Tamu are sort of the 2-horse race for the MVP of the XFL.
Yeah.
I think number 3, I have them, or third teamer in my second tier, which I sort of labeled as gaining momentum. I'm going to put the Vipers in there because
interesting.
Just simply because I understand that they were wretched in the first 2 weeks, but they are, I believe, 3rd in touchdowns for without scoring an offensive touchdown for the first 2 weeks of the season.
That's pretty funny.
And yeah, it's just sort of building off of my general theory that sort of this is around the time where the offenses start catching up to the defenses. So because of that, I think I really, really hate that I'm saying that I have faith in Mark Trestman's offense. But I do feel that he's likely, he's better than Jim Zorn. So whatever he's trying to install, I think the players are actually starting to really grasp it. And I do feel that they'll be gaining momentum in the next few weeks here. So while they may not finish because of their terrible start, I do think that they do have a chance to actually finish strong for the season. Third tier, which I label just because it's the middle class, I have the Renegades because they have been playing very well. I'm worried that they lost their starting quarterback, but also not worried because Landry Jones was absolutely killing them with his interceptions. And I don't know, it's not, there's kind of a dearth of talent in the quarterback field in the XFL anyway, so as much as I wanted to think that there's a big step down between the number 1 and the number 2 quarterback of the Renegades, I don't think that gap really exists. I think the margins are pretty thin there, so I don't see them having a problem. Yeah, and then, I was looking it up, and I think their 3rd string quarterback is Brown's Hard Knock star, Brogan Roback. So,
yeah. Who only got
in
signed
the
to
trailer
team because their other 3rd quarterback has been on and off the roster because of personal issues, family issues. So, but yeah, Brogan Roback was added to the team in week 2 or something like that. But
and when you wash out from the Hugh Jackson Browns, there's a true evaluator of talent.
It's an indictment.
Yeah. So my next tier of teams I've labeled tier 4 as irrelevant, which is just your Guardians, your Wildcats, and your Dragons. Just because legitimately give me 3 good reasons for these teams to exist other than to round out a league of 8.
Well, they're in the New York and LA market.
Oh, okay.
That's great TV ratings markets, which, as we've discussed, are huge.
I'm sure that the Wildcats outsell the Chargers in every one of their games, but
Yeah,
They might.
be more
there's
popular.
a strong chance. But I mean, they're just kind of win-loss fodder. I don't see them contending with anything. They haven't really shown anything to see that they're going to sort of dig out from just being middling teams, which I don't know what the playoff structure is like in the XFL, but I'm assuming a middling team is just going to be, again, fodder for one of the strong teams.
Yeah, top 4 make it.
Top.
So, this is a perfect time for a standings update.
Okay.
Battlehawks are first in the XFL East at 3-1. The Defenders and Guardians are tied at 2-2, and then the Vipers are 1-3.
Vipers are better than Defenders.
So the Vipers, it's actually wide open for the Vipers to make the playoffs on that side. Whereas the XFL West has got the Roughnecks at 4-0, the Renegades at 2-2, and then the Wildcats and Dragons at 1-3. So it's kind of worked out that actually nobody's really
you can
out yet.
You can still make it. I assume the Roughnecks are just going to keep winning, but that second spot in the West is open for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like those 3 teams are just going to, beat each other at about 50-50 pace. And just sort of a race to the bottom, but unfortunately one of them has to make it out. Mm-hmm. And that's just sort of how that's going to shake out. And then my last tier, which I call the frauds or the trash tier, is the DC Defenders. Because as much as they did start strong, I don't know if I necessarily buy the home field advantage. I think that just other teams have caught up to them. Their defense has been playing very poorly. I believe they are leading the league in touchdowns against, which is an indictment when you're playing football anyways. So just, I don't know, Cardale Jones looks kind of fat, doesn't seem to be throwing any balls, and just to get blanked completely in this league in the 4th week in, I think that's kind of inexcusable because, again, my running theory, this is when your offense should actually be starting to produce. And they've just shown me nothing that they have any hope of improving. They're heading absolutely in the wrong direction. So that's why they're in the basement.
This actually, so now you've brought this up because you referenced it a couple of times and it's interesting. The TD for and against, the way that you look at it, BurritoJesus, who do you think is second in the league in TDs for? So first in the league is the Roughnecks at 16. Who's second?
I assume because of the phrase in the question that it wouldn't be the Battlehawks.
It's not the Battlehawks.
So is it the Vipers?
It is the Wildcats.
Oh, interesting.
They have 12.
They did score 5 against the Defenders.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty. That's interesting. And here's my second question for you: who is so most touchdowns against, as Degenerate Gambler mentioned, is the DC Defenders at 12. Who's second?
Most touchdowns against?
Yeah,
Guardians.
It's the Houston Roughnecks.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
They're 16 and 11.
Yeah, they've been a lot of high scoring games.
So I don't know. It's interesting. The TD plus, so that plus minus that you referenced, doesn't really line up to the stats at all quite yet.
So who's leading in that category?
So right now, the Roughnecks do lead in it at 5. But if you look at the standings in the XFL East, the Battlehawks plus minus is 4. Then the Defenders are -4. Guardians are -3, and Vipers are -2. So it's almost like if you go by those, it's inverted.
But again, you have to say the Vipers' stats with the caveat of they were unable to score an offensive touchdown for the first 2 weeks. So that's 7. That's all in the last 2 weeks, which is why I hope, my pocketbook hopes, my upcoming mortgage payments hope that the Vipers are on the upswing.
I think, that's legit. So we've done a little bit of power rankings. Now I think it's time to go to America, Canada, everywhere's favorite segment, which is the best bets of the week. Now, because he's our guest, because he's done such a fantastic job so far, Degenerate Gambler, why don't you first start by giving us a breakdown of your bets last week, and then you can hop into your bets for this week.
To my best bets of last week, I had the Battlehawks parlayed with the Vipers under. So, again, my blossoming love for Jacob Tamu? Jordan.
We're going to see how many...
How many different J names we can...
James Jeremiah Tamu. Good Hawaiian name. My burgeoning love for him may have something to do with the amount of money that he's made me for the last couple of weeks here. the Vipers hitting again, I did not expect DC to get blanked, but I just sort of assumed that the Vipers would have a low-scoring game because, again, this is me living off of the no offensive touchdowns for their first 2 weeks. Now that I've seen them actually put up points, I'm probably going to be swinging to the other side this week. The other bet that I had was the under in the Renegades Roughnecks at 50.5. I still firmly believe that it is smart to have a standing bet on any under where the total is over 50, because I just have zero faith in bad football to put up a high-scoring game.
Yeah, that's probably the right way to think about things.
Yeah. And then my last best bet was actually a tip from my brother who was listening to a podcast who said that Jonathan Taylor of Wisconsin was running his 40 times around the low 4.4s all through training, but the over-under for his 40 time was set at 4.5 seconds. So it seemed like free money to me. I think he ended up running it at a 4.39 or a 4.41. It was something, he just blew it out of the water. So again, I think that's kind of the interesting part about betting on anything draft related, is that it's not necessarily based on random chance. Because I think the biggest problem with betting football is that it's a weird shaped ball and it bounces funny. And every now and then, somebody's knee explodes and then everything's out the window. Whereas betting on the draft, betting on the combine, anything like that, it's more of a game of information and what is available. So if you do listen to enough insiders or whatever it may be, if you can consume a great deal of information leading up to the draft, you can actually probably give yourself a pretty decent edge. So I remember last year, before the draft, I was listening to the fantasy football guys or something like that, the ones out of Arizona, and they were saying, they had a guest on that said, like, no matter what, Marquise Brown was going to be the first wide receiver taken.
Wow.
And they said, and all this other one that they had that they nailed was, there is no way that Jeffrey Simmons, torn ACL and all, makes it past the Tennessee Titans. So if you can hit that pick exactly, you're getting a massive payout. Yeah. And again, it's not based on chance, it's just based on pure information. So if you're able to gather the information that other people don't have, then you should be able to find some value in some of the bets coming up in the draft season here.
You're great. All right, so you went 3-0 last week, so give us your best bet for this week.
Okay, so my beloved Battlehawks are playing the fraud DC Defenders. I don't care what the line is. I'm betting on the Battlehawks, and I'm going to make just an irresponsible bet on them. I'm just going to call it a mortal lock, guarantee, whatever you want to call it.
So your line right now, presuming you're betting tonight.
Yeah, I don't care, whatever.
It is -4.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it got up to -4?
Yeah.
On Bodog?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. Hammer it. DC is garbage. The Battlehawks, my boy Jonathan Tamu is Jessica Tamu, whatever. Doesn't matter. Is just going to run a train on them. So, yeah, DC is going to get absolutely rinsed. So, yeah. Bet the house.
Okay.
My second best bet would be the Vipers money line. I believe they are no longer favored, correct?
It's +105 right now.
Yeah, I would definitely take the +105 again, just basing that on my sort of upswing in their offense. All of their production, while it still looks low, it's greatly more than half the offense of the other teams, and that's all come in the last 2 weeks. So I think that they will be able to put up points on the completely irrelevant Wildcats.
I like that. Okay, so that's your best of the week. Did you have it? You have to have a degenerate one.
I do have one degenerate bet.
Okay.
And now this is not a political statement at all, but my degenerate bet is under the winner of the U.S. presidential race. Because as of right now, or as of the last time that I looked, in order to win the U.S. presidential race, Mike Pence is paying 220 to 1. Now, this isn't an endorsement of Mike Pence, but Donald Trump is 73 years old, and he's kind of fat. So if you came to me and said, Degenerate Gambler, your overweight grandfather is going to be given the hardest job in the world, and he's going to have a exhausting campaign trail to run over a very hot summer, if you gave me 220 to 1 that my grandpa wasn't going to make it to Christmas, it's worth putting $5 on. That's $1,100.
I think I had that same thought too when Calico Jack.
It's a good bet.
And it's not even like, is there a chance there's some sort of other improprietary thing that Donald Trump does over the next 6 months that gets him kicked out of office finally? Like, and then they just have to go to Mike Pence. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's not like a big bet. I don't know.
Oh, no.
This is a flyer, but it's a good flyer on a dartboard, I think.
Man, $5 pays $1,100.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I will have one fewer beer at the bar one night. And for the small chance of getting $220 and a dead Donald Trump.
Okay, there you go. You lived up to your degeneracy. What about you, BurritoJesus, for this week?
Yeah, I am going back to the well with the Seattle Dragons. I'm a little disappointed I didn't act earlier in the week. The line was 13.5, but I would take it at 13, which is at Bodog right now, but I'm probably going to wait till it's a minus 110. I don't really like betting the minus 115 for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's still minus 115.
Yeah, it's minus 150. I still feel like it's going to trend back towards the Dragons at some point. I think you'll probably be able to get 13, but even at 12.5, I'm a little bit more hesitant this week than last week because their pass defense has been so bad. It's been the worst in the league by yards per attempt and success rate, which is pretty bad when you're playing the presumed XFL MVP and PJ Walker. And the Roughnecks are also not really afraid of like just completely stepping on people's throats. Mm-hmm. When they scored last week, the first touchdown of the game, they went for 3. And it's like that's kind of the thing you don't want to see when you're betting against them. Like they kind of have both a good offense and an aggressive coaching staff, which is like good for favorites that cover large numbers versus the Battlehawks who have a good offense and probably a bad coaching staff. But if Daniels is starting, I feel like maybe they can kind of score enough points against the Roughnecks defense to keep things close. And it seems tough for me to bet with the Roughnecks this week on that high of a number. And I feel like the Dragons are still like a little bit underrated in the market, and that's why I'm kind of taking plus 13. That's the only best bet I have this week. That's probably the only one I feel really super good about betting, and I don't feel that great about it. But the other one I'm watching, much like the Degenerate Gambler, is the Vipers and Wildcats, and I'm waiting to see what that Vipers line closes at. And I think closer to game time, you can probably get like a higher money line or like plus 3 on the spread. And I feel like the Vipers.
So we think it's moving that way? Plus 3, plus 4?
I don't think plus 4, but maybe plus 3 by closing.
You both are going to eat that money up if it's plus 3.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to hammer it. I mean,
last week it closed at plus 5. Like it seems like the way it's gone so far this season is that the bookmakers like the Vipers, the public hates them, and then the money just flows in on the other side, and then eventually you can just get like a good Vipers number and they cover, which has happened basically the last 2 weeks. And I feel like this week again, like people are going to be betting the Wildcats, and I still feel like the Vipers are probably a better team than the Wildcats, even though they have to cross the country here. But I'm going to wait to see. It's not a best bet, but it's something I'm watching as the kind of the weekend, as the bets move across the weekend.
yeah, and like a plus 2 or plus 3. It doesn't, again, just based on the wonky extra point.
That doesn't mean anything to me, really. It's more like I'm waiting for a better money line number, I think.
Yeah, exactly. None of the key numbers seem to fit anymore. Because
I think 6. 6 is probably the only key number because it's like 1 touchdown and then whatever those extra points are, like 6 and 9, because 9 covers basically your bases if they go for 3 on like a score. But it's so weird, like in a tight game, the math changes so much. Like you're not going to go for 3 when you're up. When you score a touchdown to go up 6 in the fourth quarter, you're probably going to go for 1. So then you guarantee that they have to score a touchdown and then they have to score 1. Like it's so weird how the math changes. But
yeah, I'd be interested to see sort of what the average net result of a touchdown is, because I'm sure it's like 6.1 points, whereas in the NFL, a touchdown's got to be like 6.7.
It is lower,
6.8.
yeah, because more teams have gone for 2, but they've actually, like, the conversion rate's been pretty low so far this season.
It's been real bad. So I don't know. All the key numbers seem to get blown up by that. I mean, the traditional key numbers.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think. I'm not waiting for it to cross 3. Though I guess on the event a field goal wins the game, that you're kind of better covered in that scenario. But it's still like it's more like I'm waiting for a better money line, I think.
And I still have even less faith in XFL kickers.
Oh yeah,
just because they get in the game once, right? Like
they rarely get in the game.
So I'm all about giving my fans what they want, and they want a parlay. And this week we're doing a value parlay. So if you told me 2 weeks ago that I could get the Defenders at home on a plus 145 money line, I would have said, you're crazy. If you had told me that I could get the Dragons plus 13, I would have said, I'll take that. So what we're going to do, we're going to parlay those two things. This is the Defenders' last stand. This is them at home trying not to be garbage against the Battlehawks. I will take that Defenders plus 145 money line. I will take the Dragons plus 13 points. And I will take those at 3.5 to 1 odds. So I'm putting down $10 to win $35 this week on just those two things happening.
You're going to take the Defenders to a watery grave, my friend.
This is happening. And then going on to Degenerate Gambler's theme, I also have a political bet too. So right now you can get Stacey Abrams as Biden's running mate for plus 400. So Stacey Abrams ran for governor of Georgia, did not win, and has spent the intervening time working on like voting rights, running like a voting rights organization. But she's been hovering, and there's a specific reason she stayed out of the actual presidential race, and I think this is what it is. So Stacey Abrams right now has the third or fourth best odds to be Joe Biden's running mate.
Who's the favorite?
Right now it's Kamala Harris at plus 200. Then you have Amy Klobuchar at plus 350, Elizabeth Warren at plus 400, and then Abrams also at plus 400.
Yeah, if Klobuchar, you think Klobuchar and Warren would have dropped out when Joe Biden was making those phone calls this last week, right?
Like, I don't know. I think there's a reason Stacey Abrams stayed out of the race. So if I can get Stacey Abrams at plus 400, but just behind is Pete Buttigieg at plus 600. Which, yeah. So I think Stacey Abrams at plus 400. I love that just as something to shelve for later.
Fair enough.
Just
Again,
yeah,
information game and not a chance game.
That's all we're putting in there. So I'm putting Stacey Abrams at Biden's running mate for plus 400. But yeah, Defenders plus 145 on the money line and Dragons plus 13. Let's get that 3.5 to 1 parlay.
Nice. I guess we should update the standings for the people listening on the podcast. Of course, people on the YouTube channel will be able to see the standings right on the screen.
We still aren't doing units, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to really fight for units if I actually start winning some of these parlays, so just be aware of that.
Okay. Degenerate Gambler is 7-3 after the last 4 weeks. Calico Jack is 1-3. And I'm 6-1, so
we got hot streaks, but no courage. So we'll see how it happens after this week.
If we do switch to units won and lost, my wife has actually insisted that instead of giving dollar figures, I have to put all of my losses in terms of mortgage payments that have been missed, just so I can understand the gravity of my degeneracy. It doesn't impact my gambling habits at all, but
it's just nice to quantify it.
Yeah, just to really show, like, if you lose this week, you're just a homeless person.
That's fair.
That's fair.
So we now in closing, I would just say, Degenerate Gambler, did you enjoy your first appearance on the Northern Parlay?
I absolutely did. This is my first time on any podcast ever, as a matter of fact. And I am, as I'm sure most people are, horrified by the sound of my own voice. It sounds so much silkier while I'm saying it just not in monitor headphones. But I don't know, this has actually been very, very enjoyable. I would love to come back if you would have me.
We absolutely would have you. And BurritoJesus, do you have any other closing thoughts before we end this week?
No, I think it's going to get tougher and tougher to find games that are interesting in the XFL as time goes on.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough go.
This week, I think, what would you rate the most interesting game? For me, I guess kind of Battlehawks at Defenders, but maybe Vipers at Wildcats are like kind of the two close ones.
I think in terms of discussion generated, it's Vipers Wildcats.
Yeah, for me it will, because I feel like I'm going to have to defend my third overall power ranking place for the Vipers one way or another. Or I think abandon that entirely.
I think it's certainly interesting where teams, I think, that have kind of shot up and down people's power rankings are facing each other in the case of the Vipers and the Wildcats. And there's a lot of people out there, I think, that still believe in the Vipers. Whereas like the Dragons and Roughnecks, I think that's pretty clearly a case of a bad team versus a good team. I don't think there's any world where I think the Dragons are like a contender. I think they're in the bottom tier.
Doesn't it just feel like that game's going to be 20-10?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting in that they cover the number. Like that's kind of the interesting way to frame it. Renegades and Guardians, it's like, I don't know. It's like I just don't really trust the Guardians on the road. I think the Renegades are a good team, and I don't really want to watch Philip Nelson play quarterback.
Especially now.
Well, especially now. Yeah, no, after I've learned that information, I want to actively cheer against Philip Nelson.
See everybody with their helmet on the sideline, no matter what.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, like, if Battlehawks Defenders had happened in week 2, like, that game would have been way more interesting. I mean, the Defenders have been so bad. Like, it's just like I have, like, little faith in them. Kind of like my faith in them being a good team is kind of, like, deteriorated so much. So, yeah, I guess the Vipers and Wildcats is the most interesting one because it's just, like, the two teams where the opinions have been so divergent week to week.
Yeah, I think the best way that I could put it is while watching the games this week, if my illegal YouTube live stream gets sniped as a copyright strike, I'm not going to bother trying to look up another one. I'll just play Hearthstone or something.
Well, what's your deck in Hearthstone? I haven't played Hearthstone in a while.
I used to play it all
I used to play
time.
it all the time.
Boy, right now, I've actually been playing the Battlegrounds a lot.
Oh, is
the
it
new
good?
version.
I haven't played that
It's
at
not
all.
bad. I mean, it's a good way. It's much more of a time commitment because a round takes like 20, 25
Oh,
minutes.
interesting.
I've been playing a lot of Arena recently. I think the new Arena set rotated
Oh, okay.
today, but my constructed deck, I have kind of shifted over to free to play because, again, my lovely wife found out how much the expansion sets cost, and she was so furious. So, I've shifted over to free to play. Luckily, I had kind of accumulated a lot of dust so I can make those key cards that really sort of shape the meta. But recently, I had been playing a Galakron Zoo Warlock, which it's just, I like it because it's easy enough to play, and you can just sort of rinse through a game in 10, 15 minutes. It's not like a long, drawn-out control match.
Yeah.
So,
Can you play Hearthstone Arena on Mac?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Have you ever hit Legend in Hearthstone?
Oh, God, no.
Okay.
I think, I don't even know if I've cracked past rank 12 or 10.
Okay.
I mean, again, I've always been more leaning heavily towards the Arena.
Yeah.
Cause,
Yeah, I used to play a lot of Arena for sure. I played like so much Hearthstone. It's insane. I don't even want to talk about it.
Well, so tune in next week to the Hearthstone podcast, which I don't think I'll be a part of, although I now just learned that it's on Mac. So until next week, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.